I think business process modeling is a very important aspect of all of this. I guess historically, the modelers have been information technology people who have modeled data for databases and activities for information systems to automate. But what we're seeing now is those business process models are being used to communicate in teams of people the opportunity to do manual or human work and automated work interacting with each other much more. But the difficulty is, how do you communicate that without actually having some new language? And the language actually becomes the process models. So those models they are an abstraction. They're not reality, but they allow us to sort of articulate where our problems are. They allow us to articulate what types of changes we should be doing. And they are a way of organizing our work and organizing our resources around that work. And certainly they're a way of identifying where do we measure the work, and do we have performance gaps in the work. So it gives us sort of an infrastructure or a framework to understand and to communicate and to invest and to improve. The models are the basis for that type of communication. Very, very important. And we are now starting to see some good standards come out of how can you represent those models. And we're also seeing a lot of excellent tools hit the marketplace, which allow us to actually keep track of those models in a way like a database of models. And that database of models can be communicated and shared and reused by different projects. So we get much more leverage, and we can move change along much more quickly, because the models allow us to have that communication. There's models, quite often models are developed by a professional group for their own purposes. So information technology people have come up with standards which allow them to articulate the specification they need for systems. But that's only one part of what's needed. I mean, information systems are only one aspect. There's also how do you deal with human work, human procedures, roles, responsibilities. And so there are process models which allow you to see those things differently, at least in different notations on those particular models. But when we think about business process models, we think about models that allow us to integrate a lot of different points of view. So I can integrate things such as the business events, which allow us to determine when do we start measuring, when do we stop measuring. So for example, if we're going to measure how long it takes, we have to know from when to when. And so the business processes need that information. Business processes also bring in data or information, and they manipulate that data and information in order to produce more data and information or different data information. So therefore, the business process models need to have access to the data models. And so you can actually see what actions does a business process take on which data. And so you find business processes integrating that. Another thing that the business processes do is they actually allow us to determine what policies and rules and what guidelines the business process needs. I mean, especially business processes which are very decision-oriented. Do I, for example, accept this application for a loan, or do I reject it? Well, you know, we don't just leave that up to an individual to make that call. There are some guiding factors, and those guiding factors will be the business rules, which have already taken into account the risk of making a yes versus a no decision. Those business rules also need to be known by the business process, but they don't sit inside the process. I think that the business process uses the business's rules, which might be derivative from policy or derivative from regulation or derivative from just good risk management. The business process will use those rules, but there are models of rules. And so the business process would say, well, let me see what rule I need to use. Let me see what information I need to process. Let me see when does it start. Let me see from the organization roles and responsibilities, let me see who has responsibility for actually performing this and who has responsibility for accepting this. So there's models that the business process needs for that. There's also business process models need to know what information technology requirements have to be provided. And Also, it has to know what competencies and skills the roles required. So there's a lot of models out there, but the business process model is really more the integration point of all those models, defined around the pieces of work that we do. So modeling is important, and there's, again, many different types, but the process model allows us to sort of synchronize all those other points of view.